What's up everyone, it's Indy, and there's been some hot leaks coming from the Disney Kingdom, along with a ton of info about how studios and franchises across the industry are wrestling with the underperformances of many blockbusters this year. I'll also be speaking about the test endings of Indy 5 later on in the video, how the movie was originally going to end, and even how Amazon Prime and others are failing and why it has executives so worried. Also, I don't really know what to use as footage in this video, so I'll just use games like Uncharted because I think it fits. Whatever, you understand. Let's begin. Starting off, Indy 5 is unsurprisingly a massive box office bomb and could cost Disney around $295 million in losses once the film finishes its theatrical run. Some reasons for this failure are said to be that Indy doesn't appeal to young audiences, and that the franchise needs a reboot, and the early reviews were catastrophic for Disney and it killed all forward momentum. By the way, the movie's budget was over $300 million. But now new rumors have come out from sources like Overlord DVD and Bounding Into Comics, and they both confirm that the failure of Indy 5 has launched Disney into an emergency meeting over the next few days. And the shifting of blame over Indy 5's abysmal performance is being thrown around like a hot pocket between the executives. Kathleen Kennedy is of course in the hot seat for this failure, as she is the head of Lucasfilm for now. And it's being rumored that Bob Iger and his yes men are trying to shift Indy 5's disastrous fall onto KK. One of the big parts of this leak is that Kathleen Kennedy says the reason Indy failed wasn't because of her, but it was actually YouTubers that doomed the film. Allegedly, Kennedy said the film failed because YouTubers leaked the entire plot online months in advance, and the loss of secrecy and surprise killed any investment in the film. One of the more startling pieces within this report is that Kathleen allegedly blamed Iger for pushing concepts like diversity and inclusion, which Kennedy believed would not go over well with the general audience. She apparently knew fans would hate identity politics and tried to shift the blame again onto Iger. The most surprising part of this report, for me anyway, is that Kathleen Kennedy might secretly be based. And maybe if she was, Lucasfilm wouldn't be falling apart at the seams.
Just keep hitting the fucking home runs, Disney!
Deadline had a report recently that compared Indy 5's box office disaster to be almost as bad as Superman Returns about 2 decades ago. Returns made $75 million in its opening 5 days against a budget of $220 million, which is terrible. Indy just passes that by with $82 million in 5 days, but its budget, like I said earlier, was closer to $300 million, which is, yeah, that's not good at all.
Hey, I remember when movies made me feel things.
Movies still make me feel things. I feel regret most of the time.
Surprisingly, another movie Disney used to own is actually killing it at the box office, with Sound of Freedom doing surprisingly well. Sound of Freedom was made for $14 million, and originally Disney owned the rights to the movie, and it was already finished when Disney bought the parent company that owned the movie. But bizarrely, even though it was complete, Disney opted to not release the film. Mind you, Freedom is about the founder of Operation Underground Railroad's Tim Ballard, and it explores the true story behind the human trafficking crisis that grips the world. The movie's subject matter is understandably dark, and according to reviews, it's a very bleak and oftentimes depressing movie about how evil humans are to one another. But it's also being praised for raising awareness, not shying away from displaying the real terror that's rampant around the world right now. Regardless, Disney opted to not release it, and the people behind the film were thankfully able to secure the rights to the film, and then they released it. On Tuesday, July 4th, Sound of Freedom made a little over $14 million, where Indy 5 made around $11 million the same day. This is impressive because Freedom debuted on half the amount of screens compared to Indy, but still managed to outperform it. Freedom made around $5,000 per screening on average compared to Indy's $2,500 per screening, which again also benefited from double the amount of screens and had major studio backing. Freedom, unsurprisingly, is not being covered by many major media outlets, because its subject matter exposes a lot of the goings-ons of people who own the very companies that tell the news. But it's really impressive that it did so well, and it's now made its entire budget back. But goddamn, is that pathetic for Indy 5 to be beaten by a film with barely any media coverage or corporate backing. It just proves how badly damaged the Disney brand is, especially when someone like Kathleen Kennedy is in charge of it. Kennedy also allegedly blamed the marketing team at Disney for failing to promote Indy 5 properly. And she tried to save face by claiming while Indy 5 did underperform, it was still the #1 movie in the world when it debuted. But the fact it released with little to no competition in a golden time slot, which is the 4th of July weekend, meant Indy 5 had the perfect runway to speed its way to success, but it didn't, and it's yet another major Disney box office failure. So why are so many big budget movies failing this year? From Transformers Rise of the Beast being the worst performing in its series, Indy 5 bombing hard, and Pixar losing their pants over Elemental's abysmal box office, not to mention many others, just what's going on? Well, to start, I want to speak about Amazon Prime and the man behind it, Jeff Bezos, who has a bald head I want to slap really badly. In general, it seems like streaming services across the board in movies and theaters are struggling to retain audience interest. Some may claim films like Indy 5 failed because young people don't care, and films like Quantumania did poorly because of superhero fatigue. But this is clearly not the case when Guardians Volume 3 made over $800 million. And the best performing movie of the year currently is about one of gaming's largest franchises, Super Mario. The problem isn't that people aren't interested, but that the quality has become far more important to the average consumer, and for good reason. Anyway, recently it's been making headlines that Jeff Bezos, who's the CEO and owner of Amazon, is understandably pissed due to how poorly Prime is performing lately. According to reports, Bezos is demanding answers from his executives over Amazon Prime's massive spending habits that aren't resulting in returns on investment. One of these massive bombs is an original series on Prime called Citadel, that I honestly didn't even know existed really until making this video. It stars Robb Stark from Game of Thrones and a good-looking lady named Priyanka Chopra. And it's basically a James Bond spy thriller blockbuster show, and according to reports, it failed to find an audience. The show had a budget of around $20 million per episode, but it was filmed during the pandemic. And there were lots of delays and problems behind the scenes, which ballooned the first season's budget to around $250 million. Again, this show is like 8 episodes long, so $250 million for that is literally insane. Due to this, Jeff Bezos and his bald head are demanding answers, and I don't blame him. Due to recent failings like Citadel, which somehow got a second season even though it bombed, it's very reminiscent of another Amazon bomb in the form of Rings of Power, which had a budget of around $1 billion for its first season, and reports claim most people didn't even finish the series.
What do we learn about woman dwarves that we didn't know through your portrayal?
Well, we learned that they exist.
This is necessary. This is a revolutionary moment within our time, and to be the poster child of accessibility for people of colour, for women.
But this is the first time that we see a woman, and the first time that we see a black woman in this area and this world and these works of Tolkien. You know, this is necessary. This is a revolutionary moment.
Amazon has also been unable to produce content that's driving subs despite working with people like Donald Glover or Jordan Peele and Phoebe Waller-Bridge. Yeah, that Phoebe. You know, the one that everyone hates in Indy 5. Amazon Studios head Odetta Watkins claims Citadel has failed to gain an audience due to a jaded US audience, they claim. Watkins said while Citadel did well overseas, according to them, US audiences have become far more skeptical and doubtful of new shows, saying that people will drop shows if new seasons aren't as good as previous ones, while Watkins is right in proving the obvious because yes, people oftentimes don't enjoy things if quality drops. That's making content 101, like what are they even saying here? But this analogy doesn't apply to something like Citadel, because it's a new series with no background lore or previous entries. So if people aren't watching your new $250 million TV show about sexy people shooting ugly people with guns, it's not really the audience's fault, is it? It's the same thing with Indy 5 and all of Disney's latest box office bombs. It's not the audience's fault that these aren't doing well. That's like if I blamed you for my video underperforming, but the reality is that you as the viewer don't owe me anything. My content, much like Amazon's or Disney's, lives and dies by the retention and dedication of the consumer. Attacking the audience and blaming them for your failures is a surefire way to make those people never want to come back in the future. So the answer to giant bombs and colossal wastes of money like Citadel, Rings of Power, or Indy 5 always will come back to the same sole reason. You have to respect your audience's time and work to ensure you're worthy of their attention. This is why so much media is shit these days, because these creators think it's their right to your time and energy. But that's not how that works, and it's proving that audiences are rejecting the quantity of products in favor of quality instead. Also, bounding into comics kind of just confirmed what I was already saying, that these studios feel inclined to your time and money regardless of what they put out. Bounding reports that Kathleen Kennedy pushed James Mangold, who directed Indy 5, to replace Karen Allen's Marion Ravenwood in favor of Phoebe Waller-Bridge's character, whose name I already forgot. Kennedy's reasoning for this was that she wanted a younger female hero to take center stage in the film. Because of course she does, this is Kathleen Kennedy we're talking about, and specifically she ordered Mangold to make Indy into a battered, pathetic man on purpose. Apparently Harrison Ford was fine playing an old, battered Indy because he didn't want to play the same character in the same way 5 times in a row. But it's clear this direction was terrible, and the rest is history now. Karen Allen, who plays Indy's wife Marion, said, and I quote, "I think because the last time you see Indy and Marion, they've gotten married. I don't know that I thought we'd pick up from where we left off, but I did always imagine that it would be a story with Indy and Marion going forward." When Steven Spielberg was going to direct the film, I think the scripts were more focused on an Indy-Marion story. But when Steven stepped aside and James came in, he started fresh with new writers, and they just went in the direction they went in. They were going to tell a different story. That's not to say that I had ever read a script that Steven was working on, because I hadn't. But I just knew from conversations that we had that the ongoing story had involved Marion in a much bigger way than the story that they ended up with, end quote. So unsurprisingly, Indy 5 got completely ruined and changed by Kathleen Kennedy in order to push her feminist agenda. It really does astound me how one person can be so instrumental in ruining so many franchises. And just to really drive home how badly Disney's losses have been lately, let's quickly break down how they've lost well over $900 million from their movies alone, which is actually more like $1.1 billion or more once Indy 5 is over. Movie Guide reported that one of Disney's biggest reasons for its failure is actually the existence of Disney Plus. Apparently, many consumers are quickly realizing they don't have to rush to theaters when Disney drops a new movie. They can simply wait a month or 3 and eventually enjoy whatever's released from the comfort of their home. But this is obviously severely damaging Disney's bottom line, with Lightyear barely breaking even since it made $226 million on a $200 million budget, but once you factor in marketing costs, the film didn't turn a profit. Strange World made $70 million with a $180 million budget, so that was really bad. Movie Guide goes on further to say both Lightyear and Strange World will lose Disney around $100 million each. They also say there's a notice in box office poison when films are marketed as immorally wrong, with examples like Babylon, which was a high-profile flop. But stated films that promote patriotism or traditional values like Top Gun Maverick or Sound of Freedom are doing the opposite. Minions: Rise of Gru was the best performing animated movie of 2022, and it was largely because it didn't push an agenda. And it was also family friendly, which makes sense when you're making a film for kids. Who would have thought, huh? Disney, unfortunately, is putting the message before profits or marketability, and that's why we are where we are now. So I just found this an interesting side note, but anyway. Finally, it looks like the original ending for Indy 5 has been confirmed. Originally, the film was going to end with both young and old Indy dying, and Phoebe Waller-Bridge's character would swoop in and don the iconic hat. It would have ended with Bridge becoming the new face of the franchise, and there was allegedly 6 different endings that were shot, with the best one getting a 35% audience rating from test screenings, which is obviously very bad. However, the more I read into this best ending that they had, it sounds more interesting, besides of course Bridges becoming the new main character. Apparently Indy wouldn't have died in this test ending, and he would be left in the past with the creator of the Dial of Destiny. And Indy would send a message through the dial to the future that only his son Mutt would understand, which would tell Mutt to never join the war efforts so that he wouldn't die like he does in the movie now. And this message would save Mutt, and Marion would live on knowing Indy sacrificed himself to save their son. Honestly, that ending sounds far better than the crap that we got. I'm just being honest with you. But good God, do I hate modern movies these days. They're so bad and boring and formulaic. I hate it so much. But anyway, that's all I got for you now. Let me know what you think as always in the comments. Like the video, subscribe for more, and thank you for watching. Have a dope day, and I'll see you in the next one.